Okay, this assignment is called Flip 8. You were received a map in class the other day, and you need to fill that out, take a picture of it, and then submit that to Canvas. There is an error on the map, which I'll point out to you in a minute, but first I want to give you a global perspective on the area we're talking about. We're talking about the Middle East, where Asia, Africa, and Europe all come together. This is a very, very important part of the world. People have been fighting over this part of the world for thousands of years and continue to fight about it today. And it's become even more important. If I can jump over to America, if you remember your American history, one of the problems with the gold rush is that ships had to sail all the way around South America to get people to California to get gold, or people had to take wagon trains all the way across the continent to get to Oregon before the trains were built. And a little more than 100 years ago, we built a canal that cut through the Isthmus of Panama. We did some things politically which were not so savory in order to get this done, but that created a shortcut where ships could travel from New York to San Francisco or from Long Beach to Charlotte very, very quickly by just going through this canal. The same thing happened over here in Europe. If you were a British citizen who wanted a cup of tea, you had to sail all the way around the Horn of Africa, not quite as far south as the tip of Tierra del Fuego, but still down into Arctic waters, in order to get to India and pick up your tea and bring it back home. So the same sort of problem exists there, except a little more than a century ago, the Suez Canal was dug right here through the Middle East, which meant that you could just sail up the Red Sea, up the Gulf of Suez, a leisurely pace through the Mediterranean, and cut a lot of time and distance and expense off of your trip. So the use of oil, obviously, in the modern world has made this very oil-rich area even more important, and it continues to be a place of conflict today. So, the stories that we've been reading in the Bible have centered in an area that is still being fought over today. And in order to really understand what's going on in some of the stories in the news, as well as what's going on in the Bible, I want to give you some more details. There are 6 bodies of water that I want you to know where they are on the map. Most of them you should know from our last test. And they are the Mediterranean Sea, if you want to color your map in blue. The Sea of Galilee is right here near the Golan Heights. The Jordan River flows south from the Sea of Galilee into the Dead Sea. And then there are 2 parts of the Red Sea that I want to point out to you. There's the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. So I'm not sure why my map's not letting me adjust. Let me shift it down here. And this map is pretty good, but it's a little imperfect, so I actually had to add to the map. So let's see how my paint program went. Okay. Using a crude tool, I have extended the Mediterranean Sea into this area right here. This is the Nile River, which spreads out into a wide delta before emptying into the Mediterranean. And the Red Sea shows up a little bit better on your map, forks into 2 branches. On the right is the Gulf of Aqaba, A-Q-A-B-A, which gives Israel a port on the Red Sea. And on the left side is the Gulf of Suez, which I have drawn a little bit better on the actual map that you received. Connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea via a series of already existing lakes. Again, this is probably the area where the Sea of Reeds would have been in the time of the Israelites. Coastlines were different then, so it's pretty hard to pinpoint exactly where they might have crossed the Sea of Reeds. But right now, the Gulf of Suez, very, very strategic place worldwide because of that global map I showed you already. So again, you might want to color this in. And actually, if I look at your map, you don't have the Nile River on it, and I'll just leave that off of the map for the test. So 6 bodies of water you should know, and let's focus here on the Mediterranean Sea, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, and the Gulf of Aqaba, with the Jordan River dividing the country of Jordan from Israel and the West Bank. There are 5 nations on this map: Lebanon, Syria, Israel, Jordan, and Egypt. And here's the error on your map. If you look at the top up here where there's the Sea of Galilee right here, there should be a line connecting across here. And it's not a very, very straight line. Precise borders aren't necessary. I'm going to draw the borders for you on the map. But you need to draw a dividing line between Lebanon and Israel. So Egypt encompasses everything over this way. The Sinai Peninsula is part of Egypt. Currently, Egypt is fighting elements of ISIS that have occupied parts of the Sinai. Israel is this country in yellow up here. It has a rather odd shape, kind of a big chunk taken out of it right here, and it connects again down to the Red Sea, so that Israelis have a port on the Mediterranean and on the Indian Ocean, and do not have to go through the Suez Canal, although the Suez Canal is a much more efficient way of moving things around. Syria is in the upper right-hand corner of your map. Your map doesn't actually show very much of it. There is a dot in your map that is the capital of Syria, Damascus. That will not be on the test, so you don't need to mark it down. But you hear about Damascus in the news and what's happening with Bashar Assad and what's happening with the Syrian civil war. South of Syria, this entire territory over here is the country of Jordan. The capital is Amman. I have marked that on your map. You do not need to know that for the test. And if you go further down on your map, you actually have a little chunk of Saudi Arabia down in the lower right-hand corner of your map. That will not be on the map. But just to let you know that these places that we hear about are very, very close to each other. There's a guideline of mileage, and you can see that from Israel to Saudi Arabia is maybe 100 miles across the desert to get from one to the other. And Israel is not even 75 miles wide at its longest point, and there's just a few miles that separate it from Egypt proper and from Syria. And I will talk about these purple areas in just a moment. So again, starting in the top left-hand side of your map, you can color your map if you like. You don't have to. We have Lebanon, and we have Syria. We have Israel, which is this odd-shaped area, and Jordan, and we have the nation of Egypt. There are 4 occupied territories that I have specified on this map. There's the Golan Heights, there's the West Bank, there's the Gaza Strip, and there's the Sinai. And if you look at a Google map of this territory nowadays, you will see all kinds of smaller dotted lines and little tiny enclaves. It's very, very complex, and what I'm giving you right now is a very simplified version of it. The Golan Heights was originally part of Syria. It was occupied by Israel in one of its wars of independence. The West Bank was originally part of Jordan, and again was annexed by Israel in one of its wars of independence. Sometimes Israel did a preemptive attack on an enemy. Sometimes Israel was attacked by neighboring countries, and in in each case, Israel has won the battle and taken over these territories. The Gaza Strip is a piece of coastal real estate down here. It was part of Egypt and administered by Egypt for many years. Right now, Egypt is trying to control its border with the Gaza Strip. A lot of munitions and things going back and forth. And then there's the Sinai, which is actually occupied by United Nations forces. I have a good friend who was a doctor in the Army, and at one point he was looking at possibly being stationed in the Sinai. And one of the Sinai bases is in the north in a desolate wasteland, and the other one is in the south on the sea, in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba, and was kind of like a resort. He didn't get either, but he was hoping for South Camp if he had to go. In addition, there's some cities I'd like to point out to you. Let me skim through these battles real quick. The cities I want to point out to you are Jerusalem, which you will note is right at the confluence of the West Bank and the State of Israel. It was actually divided in half, or divided in four parts, during the 1948 decision by the United Nations to create the State of Israel. Tel Aviv, Jaffa, is the economic capital of Israel. This is the political capital and religious capital of Israel. Also, obviously, Jerusalem is very important for Christians and for Muslims. Jericho, the first city the Israelites conquered when they entered the Promised Land, is here just on the west side of the Jordan River. By the way, the West Bank is called the West Bank because it's on the west bank of the Jordan River. Hebron, we didn't have a chance to talk to. That's where That's where Abraham first bought real estate in the Promised Land. Had to negotiate pretty heavily for it. Nazareth, you have heard about. That's where Jesus grew up. The stories in the Gospels talk about him being born in Bethlehem, but Nazareth is where he was raised and began his ministry. And I'm going to fast forward to the next slide and give you a list of places to jot down that are going to be on the next test. So you can pause the machine and write these down. Leave space to take some notes later. I'm going to review why these cities were important in the Bible times that we're reading about. And that's the bell. So I guess it's time for me to start teaching.